Welcome to the Cap Planner podcast, where we dive into the dynamic world of private capital markets. Whether you're new to private market investing or a seasoned professional, this podcast unpacks the latest trends, insights, and opportunities shaping the industry. Featuring expert guests and deep discussions, Cap Planner is your go-to resource for staying informed and inspired. Hello, and welcome to the Cap Planner podcast.
Hi, Morgan. I know here
Jody?
we sit, sort of fun. We're here in San Francisco, actually, at one of my very good friends' place on Russian Hill because hotel rooms are just insane. They managed to jack up the price.
People don't know why you're in San Francisco.
We're here for the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. And this week, hotel rooms that normally would be like $400 or $500 are $3,000. So while I'm not one to really stay at people's places, there's a certain reality to this week that we have to, not that we're slumming it by any stretch, but
yeah, you're slumming it really hard.
Yeah, I know.
So the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference is an institution in the private global market world because
it's really more public than it is private, but there is a private track. It is really for life sciences, I think, the starting point of what the year looks like.
I get asked a lot of questions of, do we attend the conferences themselves? Like, are you speaking at this? And then I also get asked a lot of the questions of, if you don't attend a conference, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's a great question. And this used to be a different conference. It used to be called the H&Q Healthcare Conference and then transitioned to JP Morgan. But I remember all of this. And initially,
I remember it.
Yeah.
I remember
you were a kid.
I grew up in Mill Valley, which is 20 minutes north of San Francisco. And I distinctly remember when you would plan the outfits for the week. And it was like this whole big deal because you're such a shoe person and you were even more of a shoe person growing up. And it was always the Louboutins. And I never forget, like, you wore these super high stilettos.
It had the pink on them.
Hot pink. And then the red bottoms.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I remember those two. And boots. It was a big boot game because.
And also it was when the Victoria Beckham dresses started coming out.
Yeah.
And they were so distinct because they had the
up
zippers.
The back.
Right.
I still have those.
Right.
I think I wore a Victoria Beckham dress 2 years ago here. Well, the key is because there's so many men in suits as a woman and one of the few that are here, there are more now, that it was really important to sort of leverage what you could and that you didn't want to blend in and just be in a dark suit. It was good to be in a dress and heels.
I think this is actually just as a segue. The Golden Globes were last night and Nikki Glaser is hosting, and Nikki Glaser has been so outspoken about the fact that she totally embraces the fact that she's hot. She's like, and she really follows a lot of what Joan Rivers put out, which was Joan Rivers was obviously a comedian and extremely talented, but Joan Rivers never looked schleppy.
No, I always loved Joan Rivers. You're not even old enough to remember her, but boy, did I. Joan Rivers was literally one of those laugh out loud funny, but I agree that, well, I'm not saying that we're hot, but I do think it is, well, you're hot because you're young and beautiful, but it is still important, I think, to lean into where the strength is, and that is at a conference like this, it's good to be feminine, and you're not trying to look like one of the guys. It's not necessary anymore. Right. It doesn't diminish how smart we are and how capable we are. And I have to say, actually, last night we went to our first cocktail party. So to answer your question, what we do all day long is we have meetings. We met with a VC this morning, a talent partner who's based in Boston. And now we're regrouping. And then this afternoon, we roll into 2 parties and a dinner. And and the parties are social, though, but it is still investors and
portfolio. Well, it's networking.
And CEOs. Yeah, it's networking.
It's really all networking, and it's business development. And it's a way, all of the parties at the end of the day are done by service providers or people who host conferences, or it's law firms.
Even VCs
recruiters
are not really service providers because they take their pound of flesh. But anyways, last night, not once, but twice, people asked me if they saw the Thielander and they were like, "Oh, are you Morgan?" That was so great.
Yeah, the biggest difference is people who actually do know you. They're like, "Oh, where's your mom?"
Yeah.
Because obviously our hair is different. And we do get asked a lot if we look related. We do look related.
We sound more related today than ever.
Probably. So our guest today is Ali Murata, and it's extremely timely because one of the events that we have tonight is actually our own event, and it's our 18th annual women's event that honors women executives and investment professionals. And this event is always done at a retail.
Well, it used to be that A, it's only women, and B, it was always done at a retailer, and the only men that were allowed were the ones who were serving the drinks or sort of waiting on us. That was really the thought behind all of this.
Well, it
And
was in the Saks shoe department
yeah,
originally.
yeah, or Neiman's or Gucci or Louis Vuitton or some retailer where we again leaned into the fact that, yeah, women like to shop generally.
Why not? It's also especially because the conference in San Francisco is in Union Square and that it's
Everything is there.
surrounded by all of the clothing stores and the places to shop, so why not combine the 2 together?
But this is where it's fun because you always talk about how men, do a lot of business on the golf course. Well, women have their other lanes, including the golf course. But in this case, Ali and I have been colleagues, and she really liked this event. And so then we invited her to host with us. So it's fun.
Right.
And one thing I've learned from Ali, apropos to the playing golf and all of that, is that Ali you'll hear on the podcast that she talks about she feels like the putting is where you really got to focus because you can really drive and get the ball down, hit them straight, but really you play for show and putt for dough. So,
Well, for those of you who don't know, which we'll get into it on the podcast, Ali is a trusted advisor to companies, management teams, venture capital, boards of directors, and compensation committees on executive compensation and benefits issues arising in every stage of the corporate life cycle. And her insights are unparalleled, and we are so thrilled to have her join us today and for this event tonight. Hi, Ali.
Hello.
well, we're glad to have you, Ali. We've been working with you now, what, a few years?
Mhm.
And you are based in Palo Alto. For those that are listening, why don't you give us a little bit of background on who you are and what you do, other than lawyer par excellence and great partner to all these VCs and companies? But I'm sure you have your own details that you want us to know.
Sure. Thank you both for having me. I've been looking forward to joining you here on your podcast. I practice, as you mentioned, Jody, in Palo Alto and have been practicing in the executive compensation space for 25 years. I went to law school at a very early age, clearly. I started the first half of my career in New York, and sort of act two, if you will, has been out here in Palo Alto. My practice focuses its full life cycle, but really focuses on late stage private companies through IPO and public companies. I also do a lot of M&A.
Did you always want to be a lawyer? Was that on your list, like, as a kid where you were, like, watching Judge Judy being like, I'm gonna be a lawyer someday"?
I yes, is the answer. The short answer to that question is yes, and I definitely had a different idea of the type of lawyer that I was going to be because I think that for most who end up being lawyers, unless, and I will say too, I'm the first lawyer in my family, but my vision of a lawyer was really a litigator, that I would be in the courtroom, right, and litigating
Right,
because I think that's most of what people, right, although
right.
now I suppose with new shows, that's people have seen what corporate lawyers do, at least they think they have, but yes.
That's pretty crazy. Like, when do you first remember having that, conscious thought?
Well, I will also add that I'm the youngest of 4, so I think it probably came from, a childhood full of defending myself, arguing with older siblings, set the stage for it, and I think probably TV.
It's so interesting that you say that. I think that's so especially now, how kids watch TV is so different because you don't sit down and, like, turn Nickelodeon on where you're just watch cable TV and whatever's on is on. Like, the parents have to go to a streaming service and then select it and put it on. But it's kind of the best part of it that you are exposed to all of these things and something catches your eye in some ways where then it sticks with you. Was there a show in particular or something that really was a dead ringer for you?
No is the short answer, but definitely I was a kind of Matlock, LA Law. From there, it fed into Law and Order, right? And I was just thinking you were saying kids watching Nickelodeon, probably more commentary on my parenting than anything. My son seems to take all his information in on YouTube.
Yep.
Yeah, that's very common. You know, it's funny you say this because I remember watching these movies like Working Girl and then Ally McBeal. And I just
Yep.
like the idea of the formality of what they wore and the sophistication of going
Hmm.
into an office. And that sort of, there was always back and forth between the commentary of what they were doing in person versus that running, commentary behind the scenes of what they were really thinking. And that I think really plays in. Actually, maybe we can pivot to that. I know, Morgan, you and I talked about it, but Ali, you talk about your role as a lawyer and that you do more than give legal counsel. You sort of
Hmm.
lean in, and I'd love to hear more about that.
So particularly with the type of work that I do in the executive compensation space, right, compensation is something that is very personal to people. I do executive representations from time to time, more sporadically, um, on, where I am representing an individual versus is most often representing a company. And, the reason for that is that representing individuals can create conflicts from a work perspective. And so those representations are done when it makes sense, so more strategically than anything. However, what I will say is that in connection with the executive representations I've done, and as well, even when I'm representing the company in connection with an executive, incoming executives comp arrangements, that's super personal.
Yeah.
Very personal to the point where I've worked with executives, their own spouse, partner, they don't know the kind of ins and outs and details of their compensation that I know. And
Right.
so it really does create a very different dynamic. And it also, I mentioned that it's personal. I mean, in part personal to the individual, but it also is something that is relatable where, other types and other practices of law, I don't want to call anyone out. I'll have my colleagues all over me for
Mm.
naming them. I won't name names, but right. So certain regulatory practices, it's for them more esoteric and it's difficult to translate how that impacts them personally. And I think with comp, it's clear.
So
Right.
when you say this, it makes sense to me because, and Morgan, you know this too, because we don't do any individual compensation consulting. We only work with the companies or the we'll work with a board member on behalf of the company because our answers would be the same. But it sounds like for the very reason that you do lean in and discuss the personal side of it, we don't get into that because we try and just basically be like Switzerland and say, here's what's going on with the market. So when you do this, and I've seen you in action, but I like to know your perspective versus mine. Do you actually render an opinion and give guidance past what the legal side of it is?
There's definitely a component where, the advice that's being provided is strategic business advice versus just straight legal advice, right? From the legal perspective, when it comes to compensation, there are situations, for example, where the compensation is so outsized, overblown that there are potentially risks to the company, and risks to the directors. So there's a need to be careful, right? Make sure that they're fulfilling their various duties of care, duty of loyalty, or duty of care and duty of loyalty. But beyond that, and right, the tax rules themselves, it then becomes very much a strategic conversation.
And you mentioned the tax piece of it, which is important because if you look at your LinkedIn, you have University of Michigan Law School, and then you also have New York Law School, NYU. And so I learned this actually about you on a webinar that we did because you were able to talk to the tax side as well as the legal side. And it looks like you took the bar exam in both New York and California, which is no small task at all, which is a total testament to the type of lawyer you are because in the same way that Cooley as a firm is in a league of their own, frankly, so are you. Was that a little bit of your secret sauce? Is that you do have both of those? Do you think when you were in law school, was it something that you thought would be able to set you apart, or what was the mindset or intention behind that?
So I ended up getting the LLM in tax and going straight after law school because I showed up for my first year of law school. So, like to take a step back, my undergraduate degree is in hotel administration. I'll
It's
circle back to
crazy.
this in a minute. And it all, from my perspective, ties very neatly together and makes perfect sense if, right, when you follow the thread. But I knew I wanted to go to law school. after my undergraduate degree. I went into undergrad knowing that this is what I wanted to do. I got the degree in hotel administration because, from a practical perspective, with a degree in hotel administration, you've got a lot of career opportunities post undergrad. You're not committed and locked into having to go to graduate school. I figured that I could leave my options open and make a decision once I graduated. I ended up going to law school. Law school for me was a bit challenging coming out of a business, effectively a specialized business program, because in a specialized business program, you're dealing with um, econ, finance, business, marketing, tangible, right? Topics that for me, I understood them, came easily. Found myself in law school. First year of law school, I think, is probably more similar to a liberal arts education. And I
Right.
needed something in me in something. And I took my first tax class in my second year of law school and was relieved to find that I got to sit in class with a book full of answers, and it was just a matter of knowing which rule to look at. And
Right.
so it became clear right away, from my perspective, that a statute based practice was of interest to me. It also, I will admit, I was in law school. Tax came easily for me. And I watched people who breeze through their first year of law school struggle in tax. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is easy for me. I'm going to
Isn't
lean
that
into it.
crazy? It's how
Yeah.
it goes. Like, I can't take a test to save my life. Like, if you give me a multiple choice answer and you tell me to select one, I'm gonna sit there and be like, "Well, it could be this, it could be that." I could talk it out to you and eventually get there, but I remember having a math tutor and, like, an SAT tutor getting ready for college and being like he's like, "You know it." And I'm like, "Do I? I can know it if I'm talking to you and there's a verbal part to it, but you need me to check one and forget it."
Yeah, Allie, I want to know, how does this relate to your golf game? Because I know that you like to play golf. So
Yes.
is this the same experience for you, that when you go to the driving range and you hit the balls really well or you hit them really badly, how do you do out on the course? Because you seem to have the combination of strategic as well as tactical. So do you think about this when you're hitting the golf ball?
So, it's funny that you asked, Jody, because with my golf game, this is one of the things about golf that I've never really understood. If you break golf down mathematically, everyone should be practicing putting 24/7, right? And people always go to the driving range and you're going to hit off the tee once on every hole. And your putts, if you can reduce the number of putts in each hole by one, which is possible, right, with enough practice, look at your score. And yet everybody focuses their time. They like head out to the. So I generally don't go to the driving range at all. I generally, when I go and play golf, I don't warm up either. I
Yep,
may like ball goes on the tee, I'm going to swing it. And I've played golf for about 25 years. I'm good enough. I can play anywhere with anyone. That's more about knowing when to pick up my ball and move it along and when not to.
perfect.
And it's, I am grateful when I have the opportunity to go and play golf because, right, it's sort of 4 to 6 hours depending upon when you're playing. So the approach to golf is different, I think, than the approach to working.
Have you do you think it's true? Have you done business on a golf course before?
Not like inadvertently, yes. Right? Where you meet folks out there, right? It's more about the folks you meet out there, other people who may be playing, or really a conversation starter versus I've never gone out on a course with the intent to do business.
Right.
I have the best story. I was playing here in Miami at the Biltmore, and I was talking to some guy, and he said, he worked in life sciences, and we had a conversation. He ended up being at a private company, and I said, "Oh, I work in with private companies too. We focus in compensation." And I kid you not, you can't make this up. He goes, "We only use Thielander because that's the gold standard." And I said, "Oh, that's good to know because I am Thielander." And he was like, "No way!" So he took pictures, and we ended up seeing him during the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. That was one of my finest moments. I couldn't smile from ear to ear. I could barely keep it on my face. I was so excited.
It's probably one of the best compliments you could get, especially when somebody doesn't know who you are and they're looking
Right.
at you and they're going, "Oh my god, this is you? You
Totally
exist?"
unplanned. So, Ali, tell us what's going on with deals these days, because obviously in the Bay Area and you being in what, used to
Okay.
be, or it still may be, the heart of the Silicon Valley, and I know you have a lot going on in sort of the home team backyard. What's the tone? What's the volume? What are you seeing?
We're in a very weird place, right? As you guys well know, with everything going on, both like macro, micro. I had a conversation with someone the other day who said that they thought that there would be more private equity activity right now, and appreciating this is VC, right? Focused here, which I don't. I did in the earlier part of my career do a lot of private equity related work, but now that's a minimal amount, and so it is VC. But right, these things all have an effect on each other,
Right.
and so it feels like we're still in this place of cautious optimism while people are somewhat holding their breath, which
Yeah.
at some point something's going to need to happen.
Yeah, us too. I mean, we're seeing it. We get, a trickle, a client, we send out a proposal. It seems to be taking longer, but then people are saying yes. Then three people say yes all at once. And
Right.
it just seems to be, a little choppier. But, I know that you and I have done some speaking engagements on this. So I'm going to put you on the spot in terms of your legalese for a second, because I know that it comes up. What's happening with equity right now? Are you seeing that equity is being used more? It's being used less for private companies? Is it the same?
I I think I'm probably gonna give you an answer that you've already heard from me previously, but I think that we're still in the state of certainly investors are a lot more mindful right now on of dilution and mindful that this equity pool that they have, right? Granting equity in the company that just as a general proposition, there's likely to be a longer runway before there's an exit and
Right.
they're just taking longer.
Can you explain for somebody who might not be as familiar what you mean when equity gets diluted down?
Yeah, so, and I think probably the easiest way is, um, if I take the example of a private equity investor versus a VC investor, because this is one of the key ways in which they are very different. Their profiles are very different, but, private equity investor will acquire a portfolio company, an operating company, and set aside a pool of, call it 10 to 15% for equity awards. That's all there is. That's all there will ever be. And in the VC context, companies are typically founded by one or more people. They will often have a lot, they'll own all of the equity. They start to bring in investors, they start selling the equity. And then, right, there's in Silicon Valley and particularly with startups, venture capital, it's known that you're trading off current cash
Right.
and getting equity. And so there is a lot more than 15% that ultimately will go out the door. And what I mean by the, sort of it needs to last longer if
Right.
companies continue to just burn through it,
Right.
right? They're not
Right.
gonna give away the company.
Yeah. Thank you, first of all, for explaining it. It's something where it
Nobody
comes
says
up
it
a
better
lot.
than you, because you get it down
I
right to
know.
the specifics of the granularity without too much.
I know. Jody always tells me, she goes, "Before you send me an email, just look at it and think about how you could use less words." So I tried to take that in
I don't
myself and
even mind
listen.
taking a pause here and there. I feel like when we articulate that we have to go slow, you talk about equity. It's a very well used word, but it is sometimes people don't really understand, because it's a lot about not only what you own, but how you own it. And that's where I know your level of expertise has been very important for companies, because that dynamic will play out at some point, and it will either play out badly or will play out well, depending on the level of expertise and knowledge you have, or the level of people and resources that you have around like you. So it's interesting to couch this. The youngest of four, you have been the total breadwinner in your family, the go-getter, and you also are a mom. So,
Yep.
I mean, I have perspective on this as well as Morgan. My daughter sits on this call, and also I know she's entertaining the thought about having a family. So, to all those working women out there who you can impart some wisdom, where are you now in terms of your optics on this? Your son is how old?
He's 12.
He's 12. So you're getting
Um,
into teenage years. So has everything shifted for you? What have you learned? What are you trying to do better?
I'm always trying to do everything better, um, as
Yeah,
a
isn't that
motto in life. I think, it's interesting because I think that for my son, and this is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, I think the fact that he's an only child is right, the dynamic that he has with myself, with my husband, like, our family dynamic is very different and very different for him. But beyond that, I think about, like, going into, like, in his future, all he's ever known is this dynamic of, right, what I do, what his dad does, this sort of he has a relationship with his father that is really close, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. I'm grateful for that. We're obviously blessed beyond measure, but the fact that he can have that kind of relationship with his father, I also think that for my son, he's gonna end up as an adult, and to him, this isn't something unusual. This is all he's ever known. And so I think that, whomever he ends up with as a partner in life, it's pretty extraordinary that this is what he's seen and what he knows.
Was there ever a point for you where you felt more of a squeeze between the career and the motherhood side of it?
My gosh. Again, apparently strike two on my parenting and mothering. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And,
I agree with
you
you.
know,
I don't mean to interrupt, but I never did either. Maybe at a few points in time where, the kids would get somewhere and they didn't have something and I felt like maybe I had missed the boat, but otherwise I knew they were getting the best version of me doing what I was doing.
right? And I think that it's interesting because I also think that it's unfortunate there's still a lot of pressure on women who are in the sorts of positions that we're in to, like, the guilt, right? Like, oh, you know what? My son, to your point, Jody, is getting the very best version of me. And I will be completely transparent. I wasn't entirely sure I would ever have kids. I'm incredibly grateful, thankful, blessed, all of that to have a son. He is incredible, and I tell people openly, like, had I known that this is what would happen, like, this is what it would be to have kids, I probably would have started a lot younger, and then right there, you've made a different decision, you've headed off in a different direction possibly, but it's, I do think that it is hopefully, I don't know, we'll see what happens and how he turns out, but I think going okay for him as well.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you're in good company. I can't remember the guy's name who's on Shark Tank, and he was just sitting, I mean, I
Yeah.
saw it floating around online. He's like, "It's so underrated that having a family and having kids, it's really like it's adds so much more value and purpose to your life in ways that it opens your career because it gives you this whole sense of purpose." I can't speak to it myself yet, but I can say it from the kids' point of view of looking at my mom. And I will never forget, and JP Morgan Healthcare Conference has always been such a banner week, right? I mean, we host the cocktail party together for women executives and investment professionals. And I remember being at the frozen yogurt shop, and my mom, it was right off 101 North going to Marin County, going to Mill Valley. And my mom would get off the freeway and she would meet us there, and she'd be fully dressed, and I'm talking dress, heels, purse, the whole, 10 yards. And you're looking at it, you're like, hell yeah, like that's my mom. Like, and it's always a point of pride for the kid because you know that when they love it, you feel it. And it's like you kind of take part of that where you're like, that's my parent.
Yeah, and I think that, a lot obviously has changed since in the 25 years that I've been practicing, and I think that there is still a long way to go. No doubt there is still a long way to go, but it is at least nice that, when I was an associate, you did not have kids as an associate. You did not. You made partner first, and then you had kids. That right? And it was that order. And now I've, seen plenty of women who have come up, right? They've had children younger, earlier, and it didn't derail their promotion within a firm. And they were able to keep at it. Like I said, there's still a long way to go, but we have certainly come a very long way.
And there's no one way. I think Morgan,
Yes,
so we don't piss anybody off, as much as you said, the enriching your life with kids, there are people who know they don't wanna have
for sure.
children, and I do think that's equally as valid. The only thing that I agree with is that if you wanna have kids, there's no exactly ideal time, right? I did it completely, backwards than you, and I had 2 kids by the time I was 30, and I had no idea where my career was gonna go other than,
Yeah.
even though, like, you knew exactly. I was more inspired that I knew I was gonna do something business oriented. I was a Wall Street Journal reader, and I would read the paper and say, I'm going to be in here someday." And by God, we have been. But, as you look forward now, you can see that some of the deals are taking longer. What are you
Mhm.
seeing on the horizon with compensation in general? Do you see these large pay packages still happening for top talent? Do you and the companies that are raising capital and doing well, and you've done your fair share of M&A transactions.
Yeah.
How is all of this coming together?
I think that certainly in the short term, AI is everywhere. I mean, and I thought that having been in this industry for 25 years, I had seen large pay packages, right? We hear about Elon Musk and the $1 trillion award. We've got, right, folks in their 30 going to work for large companies,
Yeah.
getting nine-figure offers. And I do think that for, like, I say in the short term, in the medium term, in the longer term, right? Like AI is here to stay and will have an impact on all of that. But I mean, I think that for the rest of the world, the pay packages are it's interesting because I think that in some respects, one of the things and it's pay related, but I think that we're starting to see a shift from this idea of, oh, everyone can work everywhere, to people wanting folks to be back in person and present. And I think that also will impact compensation, right? Because for like what we have seen in the last few years, um, people kind of able to live and work anywhere and they don't need to be in the same place. And I do think that as folks are expected to come back to an office, and if that happens to be in a, New York, Palo Alto, San Francisco, right, like a major metropolitan place, that we'll start to see comp go up.
Right. Interesting. We get asked about region a lot and if region makes a difference for compensation. And the reality is sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. But top talent gets paid top dollar really regardless of where they are.
Well,
Yes.
Morgan, maybe you want we put a whole maps, like
Yeah, they're called we did this and
Mm,
we ran a lot of versions of COVID surveys, and one of the questions that we asked, "Are you changing compensation for remote workers?" And that has now evolved into a whole interactive data set that shows job titles across the United States, what they look like for the compensation, and then also for some positions on a global level for the UK and Europe, because we've seen so much talent really moving not only across states, but really across countries now too.
right.
yeah, well, I think I agree with you that the in person, there's nothing better. And we're testament to that because we have been together for several Cooley events and
Mhm.
we do these webinars, but it's great when we get to be together and we're going to be together. We're hosting now in our, I believe what Morgan is it the 17th or 18th year?
18th year.
18th year, we're hosting a all women's, apropos, a good way to wind up this event during JP Morgan, the healthcare conference. And you're now hosting with us because it shows that we collaborate over many ways together. And that's sort of the nice part of it. So maybe your hotel management now has really come full circle because you're a very social lawyer with a wonderful personality and a very good heart, but you also have a piece of you that has that, as we say, that hustle and that grit. And it's
Right.
nice that you have the compromise. You can see the commingling of the two. And I think that not only is your son lucky to spend time with his dad, but I think he's really lucky to have you as his mom. And we're very lucky to have you as a colleague. So with that, I think we'll wind up. Morgan, any last thoughts here for Ali?
I think you covered it, Ali. Thank you so much for taking the time. We know your hourly billable rate is incredibly high, so thank you for spending some time with us.
Yeah,
All
we'll
right.
look
Thank
forward
you
to
both.
seeing you soon. Yeah, take care.
Alrighty.